This coaching would normally cost $3,500, and I'm giving it to one person for free. 3 months of free coaching I'm giving away to celebrate Optimize Your Body's 6th birthday. So I've helped hundreds of men and women over the past 6 years in particular get leaner, stronger, healthier, fitter than they ever thought possible. And that could be you. All you got to do to enter the scholarship for a chance to win it is click the link beneath in the show notes to enter, and you got to be in it to win it. Enjoy the episode. Ladies and gents, welcome to another episode of Optimize Your Body podcast. Got an incredible guest here today. Goes by the name of Doug Bopst. I was meant to ask you that, actually. How do I pronounce your name? It is Bopst. Is it Bopst?
Bopst. You got it right, I think.
Bopst. So the P is not silent, just to clarify.
The P is not silent, no.
Got it. Okay, got it. Just want to double check that. So Doug Bopst, and I actually heard you on a podcast, like we just said, right? I heard you shout out to Mind Pump. I listened to him back in 2019, I think it was, on a podcast. And I was like, man, that is an inspiring story, to say the least. You know, turning your life around, and not only that, what you've done for yourself, but the impact you're having on other people, right? So with no further ado, my man, before I butcher your story, right? Tell the audience a bit more about yourself, and I'd love to know just what got you, what drove you, I guess, to be where you're at today, and what you do in terms of just helping so many people, man.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on the podcast, man. I really appreciate it. So, I guess to pretty much sum up what I do now, I host a podcast called The Adversity Advantage, where I help people use hard times to become better human beings. And we talk about subjects like addiction, mental health, wellness, relationships, mindset, etc. I've also been a personal trainer for 15 years and built a really successful business, helping people achieve their health goals. I've also written a couple books, working on another one right now, and also have done some motivational speaking in the past. So, and I guess a lot of my inspiration behind all of that comes from my own mess that I experienced and went through when I was a kid. I know you, before we recorded, you're like, I want to hear what jail was like. And jail ended up saving my life. And the crazy thing about it was the day I went to jail, I cried because I didn't want to go in. And the day I left, I cried because I didn't want to leave.
Okay, let's pause there. Like, I don't think anyone's ever heard that before, right? I didn't want to leave prison. That's the first time I've ever heard that. It's probably the last time too. Take us back to that day, because I know you shared it on your main page, right? You pinned it to your page, and you were just like, that day, I think you got caught with like weed or something, right? And basically they pulled you over, and then boom, it was a wrap. It was like, what was it, 5 years you got or something like that?
Yeah, so I mean, it was just a lot of like bad choices snowballed into one. From someone I just was, as a teenager doing drugs recreationally, then selling them, and then getting into like harder drugs and selling like large quantities of drugs to make money. And so all that kind of came to a head on Cinco de Mayo of 2008. At the time, I was a hardcore opiate addict, where I was heavily addicted to opiates. And I was also selling a lot of weed, a lot of marijuana. I don't know what you guys call it, what you call it over in
Yeah.
Australia.
Marijuana,
Okay.
cannabis, weed. Yeah,
Okay.
it's all the same.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And so I was on my way to make a drug deal, and I had a half a pound of weed in my trunk, a couple $1,000s of cash in my glove box. And it was Cinco de Mayo, which is like one of the biggest like drinking holidays of the year here in the States. And it was dark out, and I had a busted headlight, and there was a cop running radar, and I had I flashed my high beams at the police officer, thinking it would hide the fact that I had this busted headlight, but in fact, it just gave him a reason to pull me over, because when you flash your high beams at somebody, you're telling them there's a police officer, so to be careful. And police lights go on. My heart just sinks in the pit of my stomach. At that moment, I was like, man, my life is over. Like, I just started to panic because I knew what I had in the car, and I just knew that like things were about to go down. Um, I stumbled to get my license registration out, and one thing led to the next. He searched the car, pulled me out. He found everything, found the weed, found the money, found a scale, and put me in handcuffs. And I just remember sitting in the back of that cop car and being like, man, my life is over. Like, how did I get here? Like, how did the kid who was just trying to be like every other kid, in life, like how did he get to this place where he's now going to face felony drug charges? And it was because of a compilation of just really bad choices in response to my circumstances, in response to the way I faced adversity, which is why, which is obviously a big reason of why I named the podcast what I did. And so I'm taken to jail and I'm charged with a felony, possession with the intent to distribute marijuana. And then several years or several, excuse me, several months later, I go to court and the judge finds me guilty of the felony and sentences me to 5 years in jail, but he suspends everything but 90 days. Meaning, like when you have a suspended sentence, what it means is you have to do the jail time that they give you, and what's suspended, you could potentially have to do if you mess up again. And so he gave me 5 years of probation, and so like really like the sentence was 5 years, and I could have had to serve the full 5 years had I like violated probation or missed a drug test or something like that. And then he gave me a couple hundred hours of community service, and he looked at me. He's like, Doug, like this felony conviction is going to haunt you for the rest of your life. He's like, you're 20 years old. He's like, you have so much ahead of you. He's like, I will make you a deal. And I'm like literally just standing in court. Like I didn't even know like what the deal could be because this guy just told me he was sending me to jail. So I was like, where's the deal? He's like, if you complete everything without messing up, you don't miss a probation appointment, you don't fail a drug test, you do your community service, you all I ask, I will take the felony conviction off of your record at the end of the 5 years of probation and give you probation before judgment, which essentially is just like a pass, I guess, if you will. And that day, I'm 20. I didn't think I was gonna live to see my 25th birthday. I mean, I was like high in court. I was getting high when I left court. Like that's all we did. And reported to jail a few weeks later. It was a week after my 21st birthday. And the first thing I had to do when I walked into jail was detox cold turkey off of opiates because the amount of opiates I was doing was like enough to kill a horse. I was snorting like hundreds of milligrams of Oxycontin up my nose every single day just to support my habit. Like, I couldn't get out of bed in the morning without doing a couple hundred milligrams. Like it was really bad. Um, and so the detox, and it would end up lasting 2 to 3 weeks, which the symptoms were like having the worst case of the flu constantly. And my soon to be cellmate, who I describe as looking like a more jacked version of Brad Pitt in the movie Fight Club, if anybody's ever seen Fight Club, he was like, dude, you're going to start working out with me when you get through your detox. And I was like, bro, like, I could be a model for Pillsbury right now. Like there's no way that I'm gonna work out. Like I was like 40% body fat, just no strength whatsoever, no confidence, very like timid because I was scared. Like I was scared I was gonna get beat up. I was gonna get scared I was gonna get messed with. I was scared that my life because I mean I just had realized like man, my life is completely falling apart and I don't know what to do. But if I'm not careful, I'm gonna end up dead or in prison the rest of my life. And shortly after that, I see him work out, and as a fitness professional, you appreciate, like prison workouts, like they're insane. Like, I mean, thousands of push-ups every day, pull-ups, like the stuff they do. Like, we used to like fill like the clear trash bags with water so we could do like curls and stuff in the gym and do like boxing. It was really like the creativity that exists in there is wild to just do whatever you need to like to maximize like your body weight. And so I saw him work out and I was like, dude, this guy has everything I want. This guy is ripped. He's got big arms. He's freaking jacked and tough and all these things. But I didn't know how to get there. So we're in the cell one night and we're talking and he's asking me questions. He's like, why are you in jail? And I'm blaming everybody else for my problems. I'm blaming like my parents for getting divorced. I'm blaming, you know, people for not picking me in this for sports when I was a kid. I'm blaming everybody but myself. And he looked at me and he's like, Doug, quit being a victim is the PG version. He's like, you're blaming everybody for your problems but yourself. He's like, there's plenty of people that are that were in your situation that are not in jail, right? I'm like, yup. He's like, you have two choices. Be a man, look yourself in the mirror and say, you got yourself here and it's up to you to change. Or go be a victim and go cry in the corner and say, woe is me. He's like, most people will do that because it's the easy way. He's like, it's up to you. No one's coming to save you. And at the time, the drugs were starting to come out of my system. I was thinking, much clearer than I had in a long time. And I'd realized, like maybe he's right. maybe I don't have everything figured out. Here I am, 21 years old, had 21 jobs at the time I was in jail, convicted felon, drug addict, you know, burned a lot of bridges with people, just not making the right choices. I was like, maybe I don't have it, figured out. And so that conversation inspired me to begin to work out in jail. And I remember like clear as day being so scared to do a push up because I knew that I was so overweight and just had a lot of body fat and no strength that I was going to embarrass myself and collapse on the ground when I got done to a push up. And that's exactly what happened. But fortunately for me, my cellmate Eric was like super patient and just really creative in how he trained me. Like we started with being able to do like a plank from my knees and then working my way up to doing a push up from my knees and then doing sets of push ups from my knees. And then, then you graduate to doing stuff from your feet and stuff. And it taught me a lot about the importance of just compounding small wins and about just taking that next step and climbing the ladder slowly, which really has um, built a good framework for me and how I live my life today. But it also like got me to build like real self-confidence because it allowed me to continue to do things that I didn't think I could do prior. And the same thing happened with like my cardiovascular condition. Like I could barely walk up and down the steps because I was so deconditioned. And so we used the same kind of framework where it started with me just walking in the jail to lightly jogging to jogging a little bit faster and that sort of thing. And by the time I left jail, I was able to do a set of 10 push-ups and run a mile, which to me like was like it'd be like now you asking me if I want to go climb Mount Everest with you. I'd be like, there's no way like that's gonna happen. And then that's why jail saved my life. And so he gave me a workout plan, so that to follow when I got out that I still have framed so I don't forget where I came from. And I was really emotional when I left jail because I had this incredible like transformation that was so unexpected. Like I was expecting to just rot away in jail, get out, and then just get back to doing what I had done before because I didn't know any other way. But with his help, he got me on a different path. And that's what has inspired me to continue to pay it forward with with the message that I share and the people that I try to help. So that in itself is kind of the story of jail.
That's fascinating, man. That's fascinating.
Thank
What
you.
is it? What is it that the hardest moment in prison? Then it sounds like you just answered that, right? It was probably coming off the opiates and just was that the hardest part, or was there any moment in prison which you remember and go, wouldn't want to be there again?
I mean, there was a couple things that stick out. I mean, obviously, detoxing off opiates is brutal, no matter
Mm,
where you're at. I think it was, I took my freedom for granted, and I think in freedom just in the sense where I couldn't like go where I wanted to. I couldn't talk to who I wanted to. I couldn't leave. I couldn't do any. I was kind of like, you're kind of like confined in this place. And I never realized like how much I took that for granted. 'Cause it was like, it's hard to like not, I mean, you're used to being able to pick up the phone and call whoever you want. You're used to being able to get into a car and just drive wherever. And I didn't have that. I was like, man, this is like weird, you know? That was one moment that came to mind. I mean, one of the funniest things, I mean, I tell is that, um, like a volunteer group came in the jail like around Christmas time, and they brought us like milk and cookies, and we got to sing like Christmas carols. So that was like it was kind of like a low point because it's like, what, this is where my life is right now. Here I am, I'm 21 years old in jail, and these people who probably feel incredibly sorry for me are in here like handing out milk and cookies, and we're singing like jingle bells. It was just, it was funny.
That's got to be a wake up call, that, haven't it? 21 years old, Christmas Day.
21 years old.
I'm knowing that you've got like another 4 years left as well, right? On top of that, you're like, okay.
Well, no. So I only did 90. So the sentence was 5 years. They
Oh,
suspended
got
everyone at
it.
90 days. So I had to serve the 90 days. And
Oh, got it.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a reality check of
100%. Even if it's a
like,
week,
do
right?
you,
So that's 3 straight months, right? You spent.
yeah, I mean, and you get time off for like, I mean, I don't know what the setup is now, but at the time, I believe for every 30 days you behave, you get 5 days off your sentence
Got it.
for good behavior. And so I was allowed to or I was able to shave some time off with that. But the yeah, I mean, just being like trapped behind bars is just no joke. I mean, for
Mm.
anyone. And but I learned a lot like about myself. I learned a lot about, what I wanted in my life. I gained a lot of just understanding on the system and how it all works. And I'm incredibly thankful for the judicial system for like doing that for me because like I was heading for death. Like I mean, many of my friends like growing up, we went to a lot of funerals, like and just saw a lot of death early on in my life, and I didn't realize. You don't really realize like how odd that is until you get older and you're like talking about life, and it's like you tell people like, oh, I've lost like 10 friends of mine that I used to hang out with to like addiction, mental health. You know what I mean? It's crazy. Like people that I would, regularly hang out with, not just people I like kind of knew. But I mean, I'm really thankful, man. I can't stress enough how grateful I am to be where I am today. It's a really cool thing. And I just think that sometimes people, I mean, one of the hardest things I think for people when they're trying to change their lives is they don't realize they're a lot closer to that breakthrough than they actually are, right? And they think that they have to go from like 0 to 100. Like I didn't just go from jail to podcast host. Like I went from jail to like, okay, how am I gonna like stay out of trouble for for a few months after jail to getting really passionate about fitness. That was like, oh, that led to me like having to beg for a job as a personal trainer like down the road. That led to me being, oh, I'm pretty good at training people. Let me like build a career with this. I did that, which I didn't think I was going to be able to do. And then you start sharing your story. I'm like, oh, like people actually care about what I have to say. And then all that like just compounds over time. And now I'm at where I am. But none of that would have happened had I have not gone through everything that I did in the 16 years that have led up to this moment. So I always just tell people you got to just take it like literally like one step at a time, one day at a time, and just kind of do what you think you need to do that day, and then just compound those days, and then watch what happens.
Hey man, I can thankfully I didn't have to go to prison, right, to get these lessons,
Yeah.
right? But I'm very lucky as well because there's a lot of addiction in my family. There's only me and my mum actually, and the whole family who don't take antidepressants and stuff, right? And not looking
Wow.
down on anyone, anything like that, but there's a lot of addiction in other areas. That's another conversation. But for me, I was lucky. I got into lifting weights 15, 16 years old, fell in love with it like yourself. And then by the age of like 18, 19, well, 19, I was PTing people. So same as yourself, PTing people for 12 years, been doing obviously the online stuff now for 5 years. And it kind of, anyone who's been in the game of actually coaching people, whether it's personal training or any form of coaching, it goes beyond your passion then, doesn't it? It's like, wow, this is kind of my purpose. And it gives you pretty much all the fulfillment you need, right? Actually, well, pretty much helping people become better, right? And it's inspired. Obviously, you inspire other people, and then just by seeing other people transform, right, that inspires you, doesn't it? It's like a ripple effect.
It is, and I think one of the best ways to make peace with your past is to help other people through the struggles that you went through to the best of your ability. And that's why I think I was super effective in my career as a trainer. Um, I mean, especially early on, where I was able to relate to people and I was able to like, I just knew that like, okay, like, how am I going to separate myself from everyone else? And I knew that my story was like my separating factor and like being able to get into the minds of people I was working with. So I would ask them like real questions about their life, and I would be like, because typically like people would come in and I would have a session with them. And then in the intro session, you're like talking about their goals. And I would talk to them about their goals and how I could help them. But then I would ask them like why. So if somebody came in and was like, hey, I want to lose like 20 pounds, I'd be like, oh, that's amazing. Like, that's super awesome. Why is that so important to you? And they'd be like, well, like, I just think I've been carrying around some extra weight and I just don't feel good in my body. And I just would feel really good if we did. And then I would be like, oh, totally get that. I can see how that would be like really like, impact you negatively. Like, but why, like, what's really at the root of like why you feel that way? And then, of course, you would get to like the root of it. And the root would be something like, you know what, like, I am so embarrassed to be around some of my friends because they're like super fit and in shape and I'm kind of just carrying a bunch of extra weight. I'm afraid to like wear certain things. And then you would get to like an emotional thing and you'd be like, ah, like I've been there, and I was able to relate to them. Like I've been the guy that was afraid to take my shirt off at the beach because I was like 40% body fat, right? And so through having conversations like that, I was able to build a lot of trust and relatability to these people. Because at the end of the day, like, I mean, 97, 98% of your clients don't care if you can teach them how to do a better lunch, right? At the end of the day, the general population, all they care about is, can you put it together like like a decent workout program for me that's gonna help me reach my goals and also help me feel better leaving that than when I came in. Like, are you gonna be like the best, one of the best parts of my day? And and so once I was able to establish like that, I just became like, it became like a new high for me to help people with their fitness, because I felt like I owed it to my cellmate to pay it forward and to give other people the gift that he had given me. And then I just started to establish like a really solid reputation, and I built all of my business was built through referrals. Like, I never did any marketing; it was all just word of mouth. And I just got really lucky that my passion for fitness and my business like lined up like beautifully. And it's been really amazing. It's been really kind of amazing because like I never, I mean, it's like if I was like, you're asking the 15-year-old version of me, like, yeah, you're going to be a personal trainer when you grow up. Like, yeah, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to rip bong hits and smoke my cigarettes and eat my cheesesteaks, like that's what I was doing.
Man, that's crazy though, isn't it? Because I know when you got into the cell, obviously your cellmate at the time. Hey, that's the fact that you had him as a cellmate, right? Is a
Mhm.
win, right? The fact that he took one look at you, right, and he was like, right, we got to sort this out, and then that's completely shaped your whole journey. With the victims, I want to touch on what you said earlier, though, man, with the victim mindset,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
What would you say to anyone who's really stuck in that victim mindset? And just for the audience, is like you can be a victim or you can kind of take ownership, like you said earlier, right? And we do it without realizing sometimes, right? We make excuses for certain things, and then it holds us back, right?
I mean, there's a couple things I'd say. I think one is, it's okay to feel like that in certain, in situations, and you have to have compassion for yourself. And I think it's really tough when like some really horrible circumstances happen to people that they couldn't control, that were really like unfair. They get dealt a really bad hand. But, you know, from what I've learned, I think what people want in those situations, they want to feel like things are going to be okay. And they want to feel like they're going to be able to find some level of happiness again, or they're going to be able to find some level of certainty in their life or some level of success or whatever it is. And what I've also learned is like, feeling sorry for yourself for long periods of time inhibits all of that, right? Because what it does is you give your power away to somebody else or something else, and it forces you to not take ownership for the rest of the choices in your life. The other thing is, it's really easy to feel sorry for yourself and then tell other people about that as an excuse as to why, your life hasn't gotten better. And I think for me, like, I did that. I blamed everybody else for my problems but myself. And I used all of those, things that quote unquote happened in my childhood as an excuse to behave like, you know, somebody that wasn't a good person for a while, because it was easy. It was a great story to sell because people felt sorry for me. And my cellmate was the first person to really like tell me like it was, and to tell me like, hey, listen, like, circumstances were tough. I get it, but you decided to act in the way you did following those circumstances. And that's the nature of my podcast, is to really, I guess, try to give people a better way out for when they go through different hard times in their life, to help them understand, like, it's not necessarily um the hardship that messes your life up. In a lot of cases, it's how people respond. And I think there's nothing more empowering for people. Nothing will build more strength in your life than having the ability and the self confidence to get through hard times in life. It just, you build that adversity muscle, and the more adversity you go through, and the better you get at it, I think the easier it becomes to deal with things. And not that those circumstances are inherently then, just okay. It's just like, oh, you build trust in yourself to know that I can do this. Like, when life throws me a curveball, I can figure out how to hit it. I'm not going to sit there and let it just, you know, bash me in the face or whatever. And I think that, people, it's like I never really figured this out until I went to jail. Like I never figured out that I was the common denominator in all my problems until I went to jail and I was able to take a hard look at myself and be like, huh, like I'm at the root of all of this. Yeah, I mean, I can sit here and look at my certain situations and be like, that wasn't fair, but that didn't lead me to going to jail. Like I did that. Like I chose to do certain things. And so I think that's the biggest piece of advice I can give with that is, that life sometimes is not fair. And it's okay to like feel sorry for yourself for a period of time. I get that. And I mean, I that's normal. But to let that be the story you tell yourself over and over and over again, it traps you from getting the very thing that you want, whether that is to be happy again, successful, to find love, or whatever it is that you're going through.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I love that. And I was the same in my 20s as well. Played the victim mindset a lot and kind of yeah, just complained a lot about certain things rather than actually just pushing through. But you have to go through that as well, don't you? To actually understand, going back to what you said there, it's the story you're telling yourself, right? It's really, really difficult though, because I think we'll get into like relationships and your environment and stuff as well. It's almost like if you're around the wrong people, it's like a virus, right? It's almost like your diet, what you're taking in. You can use social media as an example. That's like part of your emotional environment, people you spend time with. It's one of the most important things, right? Social influence. But before we get into that, I'd just like to ask you, Doug, about a lot of people listening to this, they'll struggle with like the all or nothing mentality. A lot of people listen will already be in motion with their health, training, nutrition and stuff, but they'll struggle with the all or nothing mentality. It might be things like emotional eating because of maybe
Yeah.
internal issues they haven't dealt with. What advice would you give to people with those? I know it's kind of like it depends on the
Yeah.
person, but what's kind of the broad advice you would give to those people who struggle with the on or off kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I think first, if you think you have something deeper going on, I think it's always important to get like professional help if you have some sort of, you know, disordered eating pattern or something like that. I mean, I can only speak from my experience. I think like when you're black and white about things, it can be really, really good for a certain period of time. You're all in, you're freaking crushing it, you're 100% on your diet, 100% on your workouts, you're all in. But the minute you mess up, it's like you're going down like like an avalanche. It's like everything falls apart. Like for me, like when I was like that, when I would mess up, it was like, all right, now I'm going to Five Guys, then Cold Stone. Then I'm like, all right, I've already like destroyed my diet for the day. Let me go to like get some frozen yogurt. Then let me go. I mean, and so that was because I had this. And it was because I had an unhealthy relationship with the way I viewed fitness. Like I viewed fitness as a mechanism at the time in my 20s to gain attention and validation from other people and to prove something to people, which again, I think serves its purpose for a period of time until it doesn't. And once it doesn't, I think everybody's kind of everybody has this dance where it's like I got to figure out like why I'm doing certain things, right? And I had that dance in my 20s and I was like very fortunate to learn that I had to reestablish what fitness was for me. And I think that a lot of it just comes down to really asking yourself like what your view is on like why you're doing certain things. Like if you're doing it to to prove something to somebody or whatever, and then the stakes are super high to fail because you're putting so much stock in other people's opinions, then you're gonna when you mess up, you're gonna be really hard on yourself. Whereas I think if you think of it as a like lifelong journey of learning and getting better and knowing that you have so much time on your hands to work on your health and fitness that you're able to kind of dial it back a little bit and be like, all right, like I don't have to be like super, super obsessive with everything. But I mean, as somebody who's been in it, it's definitely tough. And I think there's always, at least for me, there was something deeper going on where I had a perfectionist mindset. If something wasn't perfect, it wasn't good enough. Um, I was incredibly hard on myself. I viewed fitness as my identity and the way I looked, which was all like deeper than the food that I ate. And once I started to address that, like everything else kind of got better.
And on that note as well, right, Doug, with stress management and coping mechanisms, because
Yeah.
we turn to food, You can even do that with exercise, right? I did a bit of both. I went to the extremes. With a lot of people with stress and challenges, firstly, I'd love to know, number one, how you deal with stress differently now or setbacks in comparison to the old you.
Hmm.
And number two, what are the biggest kind of challenges you see with all the people you've coached, right? In terms of the sabotage, right? You mentioned perfectionism is a big one, right? All or nothing. They're all different, what I call self-sabotage superpowers, right? And a lot of us have been through them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I guess for me personally, like how I manage stress. I mean, I don't, it's interesting. Like, I guess it's like a muscle, right? So, like, early on, like after jail and like for years that would follow, I would obviously I would go running and I would go to the gym and I would do things like that that help me reduce stress. Now, I don't, not that I don't do those things. I still like, obviously I exercise and stuff. I just don't think about it as much. Like when I'm stressed, I'm like, yeah, I'm stressed. There's stuff going on or whatever. And now you just figure it out. And sometimes like it's also good that, that I've learned that I think one of the best ways to manage stress is to like do some self reflection, because sometimes we end up just overthinking things, or we end up um, reading too much into certain things, or not thinking objectively. You're caught up in the moment. And if you can take a step back and zoom out, you're able to see things from a different perspective and realize that things aren't as bad as they may seem. I mean, I'm fortunate that, I mean, I do, we all experience stress, right? I wouldn't have a functioning nervous system if I told you I was never stressed. However, I can't, it's really rare these days. I mean, that stress, like, I mean, it's actually like not, I can't remember the last time like me being stressed prevented me from like living my life. You know what I mean? And so I think it takes, working on healthy coping mechanisms for a period of time. It works on just going through stuff, in life, to where you get to that point where it's like, all right, like I feel stressed, but I still have to show up, And that's just the mentality that I've had over the years. And it doesn't necessarily work for everyone. I get it. But, I think sometimes we overcomplicate things and be like, oh, I'm stressed, so now I have to do something to like get rid of it. And the reality is like, if, I think like money is like an easy example. So let's just say somebody has worked at a company for like 20 years. They're making a good salary, and then all of a sudden they get fired. Well, if you weren't getting stressed, there'd be something wrong with you physiologically. You know what I mean? So I think like being able to like understand that it's okay that you're stressed, and that, just figuring out ways to figure it out. Like I think what also helps stress is like making moves in the right direction, right? I think just sitting there and kind of, and I think meditation is a great tool. So when I say this, I don't want to get to be taken out of context. But it's not like I don't think you're gonna meditate your way into like finding like the answers you need, right? If you're in a situation like that, I think it can help calm you intermittently. But as far as like the best way to like reduce stress for a situation like that, like you have to start taking action towards like whatever it is you want to go, because that's what's ultimately going to reduce that stress. As far as self sabotage, I think that I've always done my best with my clients. Like I don't. If somebody comes to me like, yeah, I want to get in shape in like in like 3 weeks, I'm not their trainer. I've always been somebody that's like, we're gonna commit to like X amount of days a week, and we're locked in. And because I want this to be like a long term journey, and so I've set that precedent early on in my career, which was good from a business perspective, but also from just like I just knew what it would take for people to be committed. And um I try to get them to like look at things in a much bigger lens, where like if the scale wasn't moving one day, okay, like I try to like get them to like focus on other things that are going well in their life, while also having real conversations and being like, all right, scale's not moving, like I want to see like a 3-day diet. I want to see how much water you've been drinking. I want to see like how much sleep you've been getting, to be able to have like some sort of frame to see like what it is that they're actually doing. And then also like reinforcing the fact that reaching goals in health and fitness like really sucks sometimes. It's hard. A lot of dedication, sacrifice. So reaching a health and fitness goal can like really like suck. It'd be really challenging sometimes, because it takes a lot of sacrifice, effort, You're not going out as much as you once were. You're not eating certain foods. You're having to put more time into the gym. Like all these things that are really, really challenging. And it takes time, right? Like you're not going to necessarily see these amazing results in a day or two. Sometimes it's going to take, a lot longer than you think for things to happen. And I say this because, what also does suck is not reaching your goals and looking back and being like, I wish I would have like dedicated the time 20 years ago. I wish I would have dedicated, more time towards my goals, or I wish I would have believed in myself more, whatever the example is, because now I'm in a place where it's way harder to achieve those things. And I tell people that, and I've told that example to countless clients over the years when stuff isn't moving the way that they want, to get them to stay in the game, because once you quit, like you're not in the game anymore, right? You're kind of off the field. But if you're in the game and you're like, all right, scale's not moving, let's focus on where I am winning in my life and my health and fitness, to like, give yourself some sense of achievement, but while also being real with diet, sleep, water, etc. Like you can then like navigate and try to make tweaks to help that person get more dialed in. And I found when you do that, you get people to buy in because they're like, oh, like you're right, I haven't been like eating as well as I thought, or I haven't been whatever. And then a lot of times you make adjustments and they like you just let things ride as they are, and things tend to be okay. And I've also always, not always, but like put a big emphasis on like strength as a measure, as a marker of improvement with people, because that's like a real easy thing for people to see. Is like, all right, I started out like I was benching 10-pound dumbbells. Now I'm doing like 20s. I was doing 20s. Now I'm doing 30s. And it gives people like a sense of achievement without having to rely on the scale like as much as most people do. Um, but if you're coaching somebody and all they care about is the scale, and you can't like talk them out of that trap, which it's a hard trap to get out
Oof.
of, because
I'm glad we're
you
talking about
know
that. It's a really hard trap.
it's a hard. I mean, when somebody is dead set focusing on the scale, which right, if they want to lose weight, that's the main. I mean, that's how you measure it, right? So if they are caught up in that trap and they're not seeing, you can't get them to see any other progress they've made. I mean, it's gonna be really hard to convince that person to keep training with you. Um, and so I think that you have to find these unique ways to convince somebody through their own actions that they are making significant progress, so that they don't just back off, to where they were, and like, what, like I tried this fitness thing, scale wasn't moving, or I didn't lose as much weight or whatever, and now I proved because they always want to prove themselves right, right? And a lot of people, when they come into the gym, in my experience, they've had bad experiences with the gym, and not like in a dangerous way, but more like they came in the gym, they tried something for a month, they didn't see results, they walk out and they cancel their membership. They try something for 3 months, it's not what they thought it would be, they cancel their membership. And so people are already looking for ways to prove they were right. They weren't going to actually achieve their fitness goals because they've told themselves that over the years. So they'll look for the first way to validate that, and so you have to understand that mindset going into it, and then being like, how can I keep this person on track and motivated, while, through the dark times of when the scale is not moving and when they're not exactly as motivated to exercise. And I think I think a lot of people, and I was like this, I was like a rookie trainer, and I mean, I was successful, but I in many ways, I wouldn't say I sabotaged my client's success, because that's not true. I made it harder for them because I thought that because I was so obsessed with fitness that they had to be as obsessed with fitness as me. And that's just not the way the world works. And there's plenty of people that can be in really good shape and work out a couple days a week for 30, 40 minutes. You know,
100%.
they don't have to work out for, an hour, 5, 6 days a week doing 2 days, which I was doing at the time, because I was in my 20s with no family and no real commitments, and I could just do what I wanted. And so I think once people understand what I just said, and then understanding like how can you insert fitness into people's existing lives, I think you'll win long term because now you're giving people more autonomy over their own decisions, and you're giving them more flexibility um, to achieve their goals, not just make it be like, not make it be just determined by whether or not the scale moves.
That's such a good point, man. And that's what I've had to get better at. Just what you said. You have to help clients understand the wins that they're making, right? It could be something food related. A lot of times, a lot of the wins my clients get are like behaviors, for example, right? I'm sure you can relate to that. I had a client recently and they
Yeah.
were just like, "Oh, I went to this event and I just didn't have the desire for those foods for the first time ever." And I was like, whoa, let's pause there for a second. When was the last time that happened? Never. That's a bit of a win then, right? And she's like, actually, yeah, that's actually quite incredible. It didn't. I think she said, no, it was a guy actually. He said it didn't seem like real food, you know. And another guy, he had some M&Ms recently, right? He ate some M&Ms, and he was just like, they just tasted like chemicals. And it's like that's kind of like that's not necessarily going to be what you need to achieve. But then he had that moment where it's like, oh wow, I've always enjoyed these foods. Now I enjoy these foods, and I do look better as a side effect. But what you said as well, my man, is focusing on other metrics, right? Like strength. There's no better marker of that, right? Getting stronger in the gym and other performance or fitness related goals and just being healthy, right?
Yeah, and listen, like here's something I'll share. Like I think people also need to understand like missing a meal or cheating on your diet once like won't destroy your results. Thinking that one bad meal or cheating on your diet will destroy your results because you will overly obsess about everything you eat. You will have an unhealthy relationship with fitness. You'll begin to like really develop this, not hatred, but you'll find yourself not having that same love and passion for health and fitness that you did when you started. And, it's going to impact other areas of your life, right? Because it's not just about like fitness. Like fitness is one big spoke of the wheel, right? But there's also relationships and stress and career that all are, equally as important. And so while I do think like the healthier you are, the better you will be in other areas of your life, you still can't let that spoke of the wheel be the only spoke of the wheel, which tends to happen a lot in our industry. And this is something I've learned, just through, I mean, experience and training a lot of people, a lot of different walks of life, that you just learn to understand, like, how can we make fitness simpler for the general population? And, you know, I think that you have to kind of really identify like what it is you want to achieve. Like if you're somebody who's competing at like a high level, then things may matter for you more than the average person. But if we're talking like the general population, skip, not eating the best for a day is not going to ruin your results. And I think the faster you accept that, I think you feel like this weight come off your shoulders like, oh, I don't have to be perfect to be healthy anymore.
Love that, man. Love that. That's the key thing. That's the, in a nutshell, what it is, right? It's like keeping going when you get setbacks. And that's what I think you can probably relate to that. It teaches you a lot about that, doesn't it? Fitness. Okay, not quite getting the results I want or whatever. I slip for a day or two. I'll pull it back. And then when you keep going, you're like, oh, actually, I'm getting great results. And now I've learned this lesson as well. And that's what's really valuable, right? Because it transfers over into every aspect of your life, really, doesn't it? That kind of resilience.
Yeah, and I also come at it from a place where I was there. Like I was, in my 20s, I had like I had veins running through my abs. And I would, if I ate poorly, I would go into the bathroom at that restaurant and I would look at myself in the mirror and see if I still had my veins. That's how crazy I was. So I speak from experience and like how, I mean, as great as it felt to like look a certain way, the day, I mean, the dark side of that was really dark for me of like how I felt about myself truly. And because I was doing it, I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I was doing it because I wanted people to say, look at him. He is so ripped. And I didn't believe, a lot of those things about myself. I still was like, oh, I have to get leaner. I have to do this. And it's just this super slippery slope that a lot of people fall into. And um, the faster I identified what I wanted in my life and I had a healthier relationship with health and fitness, my mental health improved, my relationships got better, my relationship to external validation got much better, because it was because I chased after this thing thinking it would get me something that it didn't give me, which I thought it would just give me happiness forever. And then you realize like it's a really lonely journey, like having to say no. Like, I mean, my friends of mine would invite me over to like watch football and eat pizza, and I'd have to say no because I was like afraid of like eating a piece of pizza and what that was going to do to like my vascularity. I mean, it was really, really, it was crazy. And this is like, I'm like, it's just, I mean, over 10 years ago, that I went through this transformation. Um, and I think I just think I don't think it's talked about enough, in our industry that, if you're just not careful, you can push people like so far away that they lose their own, sense of purpose and why they're doing it.
That's a really good point. I went through a similar journey, right? Because we can justify it because we're being healthy, right? Or making good decisions. But true health really is obviously the connections you have with people as well, right? So if you're missing out on loads of social events, obviously you've got to say no to certain things, right? I mean, you haven't got to, but for your health, but it can really be detrimental then, right? To your mental. And on that note, right, I want to switch gears a little bit to kind of wrap this up, Doug. Unfortunately, we're facing a bit of a crisis now with men.
Oh yeah.
In Australia, for example, unfortunately, I think one man takes his own life every kind of 7 to 8 hours, right, on average.
Wow.
It's pretty grim, pretty sad, to say the least. I was wondering, like, and this is a global thing as well, right? What's the one thing, or not one thing, just like, what is it that you think men need to hear, right, to take that one step in the right direction to kind of start leveling up their life and feel better about themselves? I know there's a lot of like variance there with like clinical depression and stuff. But whatever advice you would give to some other people or just to a younger version of yourself?
I guess taking the stance of like giving the advice to a younger version of myself, I would just, I'd want to hear that like everything's going to be okay, with the caveat that if you do the next right thing, that, everything's going to be okay if you do what you need to become a better human being. You do what you need to become healthier. You do what you need to improve your mental health, your relationships. And so that work, that is different for everyone. Obviously there's plenty of people that are struggling right now that, could benefit from getting professional help and guidance on what they're going through. There's some people that maybe just haven't been to the gym in a while and all they need is like just to go get back in the swing of things and develop a routine and they'll be on their way, or they need to leave a relationship or whatever. Everybody's story is different. I think I think the idea, I love the idea of just figuring out ways to stack small wins in your life. I think that's the ultimate key for transformation, and just staying on track with what you think really matters for you. And obviously I can give you everything that I think works for me, but I think you have to find what matters to you. And like if you really are somebody who's focused on improving your mental health, like think about like what are some things that could really help that. And if you like were to research this, I'm sure it would say like, finding a licensed clinician that could help you talk you through your problems. I'm sure it's like, pay attention to your sleep and your stress and look at your relationships and look at like, your health routine and get checked out. Like, and if you could just find a way to like understand where you're at in those areas of your life and then figure out like what are some small wins you can make through that, I think you'll be surprised at how far you make it. I don't think it's about rapidly transforming your life in a matter of days. I mean, crap, I've been going at this for over 16 years and I still feel like a child sometimes.
Yeah, man, same. I can relate to that as well. You're always getting humbled, right? Life's always going to humble you at times, right? But I wanted to ask you on that note as well, just the
Yeah.
relationship thing. I know you're a busy guy. I know you have lots going on. What I struggle with in that area is just making time for social connections. I'm getting better. How do you manage to factor that in and nourish relationships with everything you're doing?
Well, I think what I've learned about that is, I think relationships can be like the most fulfilling thing in the world. And I think, I'm engaged and like before I got engaged, I was just like a bachelor, just doing whatever I wanted to for personally and professionally. Like I like traveled when I wanted to, I did what I wanted to. And then I think like when you find the right person and you like, I guess you fall in love with each other, you realize that there's so much that brings that you shift your priorities naturally. At least that's what I found in my experience. And that, yeah, I have a lot going on professionally, but nothing will come before like my relationship now. You know what I mean? I just like I prioritize, and I don't want to say that I'm like, yeah, I do nothing but hang out with my fiance every day. That's not true. What I'm saying is I've made adjustments in like my day and how I mean I don't go to the gym and train early mornings anymore because I value my time in the morning with her. I don't like travel like at the drop of a hat like I used to because I think about like how that would make her feel and just making sure that like I am prioritizing our relationship and making my travel count and taking her with to things when I can. And all of that, like I just think for me just came kind of naturally because when you find the right person, you begin to be like, all right, like it's worth it for me to not stress and focus so much professionally that like you have to like relationships are like they're like plants, it's like if you don't water them they will die, and they have to grow. So like for me I've had to make some adjustments that I wanted to make to make sure that my relationship would grow, and then in turn that's obviously leads to more fulfillment in life. But I think the idea, I think what happens sometimes is people just they're like, oh, I'll work on my relationship like later in life. It's like, no, you won't. Like, like what ends up happening is that just becomes a pattern and a habit. And then you're like 50 years old and you're like, crap, like what happened? Because you've been working so hard for what? To like you kind of by yourself and you don't have anything to really show for it. And I didn't want to be like that. Like I knew when I found the right person, I wanted to like settle down and I wanted to build something. And I knew it was like an extension of what I was already doing. Like, my relationship with her doesn't like isn't the only thing that necessarily fills me up. But I got to a place personally where I felt good enough about myself and my career that I knew that this could be a great like addition to what I was already doing. And I think that when you have that frame of mind, it kind of you don't make it like where it's like your end all be all necessarily, but I think that you have to prioritize like that because money will come and go, right? Careers will come and go, but when you find the right person and you like if you piss it all away, you'll be really sorry later on. I mean, that's just the way that I've kind of thought about it.
Yeah, amen to that, my man. Um, Love that. Great way to finish, man. And I just wanted to just see where the audience can find you, my man. Because I know the Adversity Advantage podcast. Shout out the podcast, some amazing content on there. So definitely go check that out. But yeah, tell us where we can find you.
You can find me everywhere at Doug Bopst or the Adversity Advantage podcast. We're on all the platforms, and I appreciate you having me on, man. I love what you're doing, and if I make it down to Oz sometimes, I'll have to let you know.
Definitely let me know,
it's
man.
It's on our list of travel, but it's also like a 74-hour flight, isn't it?
Yeah, it's brutal, man. The flight, especially from the States, it's savage.
Yes.
But it'll be
How
worth
long?
the trip. You have to come
Is
for
it
at least, I don't know, 2-3 weeks minimum if you come here. That's the problem with the jet lag, isn't it?
No, yeah, I know. I'd want to come for at least a few weeks, but I'd want to hit up like Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah,
Is it
man.
right?
New Zealand, yeah, it's only like a 3-hour flight. New Zealand's a beautiful country as well. But you would love it down here, man. The lifestyle, the people, the beaches, you know what I mean? You would love it.
And there's koala bears down there, right?
Yeah, there's koala bears, man, not too far from here. There's plenty of
Really?
them around. Kangaroos, mate. Only place in the world
Kangaroos,
you'll see
really?
kangaroos hopping around, you know what I mean? But people think it's funny. People think they just hopping around the city and stuff. It doesn't work like that. You have to go out to the country and find them. But about 2 hours from
Oh,
here, you'll go see a bunch of kangaroos just hopping around, boxing on the
that's really
side of the road. You know what I mean?
wait. They box?
Yeah. You see them.
Kangaroos box? Really?
Yeah, man. Yeah, you see them like, yeah, having fights. Basically, it looks like they're boxing anyway when they're fighting. It's funny.
But they're not like bopping around on the road.
No, they're on the side of the road though. I've seen them on the side of
Oh,
the road, like these big 6-7 foot kangaroos just having it out. You know what I mean? Having a straightener.
yeah. I mean, I'm big on wildlife, so
Oh
that's
man,
something that yeah, I'd love to experience that.
this is the place to be for that, man. But yeah, man, appreciate your time, Doug. It was incredible to have you on, and there's so much value in there for the audience. So thanks again, man.
You got it, man.